Whodats. Welcome to the podcast you've been waiting for. Great perspective and exclusive interviews.
It's a hard job for those guys because it's happening fast.
The kind of Saints insight and fun commentary you won't get anywhere else.
We've got plenty of technology to speed things up.
It's time to kick off your Been There, Done That Saints podcast, where we hand it off to our host, Mike Nabors, and Super Bowl winning linebacker, Scott Shanle.
Proud of these guys.
Welcome back. Another edition of your Been There, Done That podcast. I'm Mike Nabors. And you know what? We're going back-to-back quarterbacks. Last time around, we had Archie Manning. This time around, we have the Cajun Cannon himself, Bobby Hebert. And it's really good timing because Michael Thomas gets his big deal. Back in the day, you Saints fans remember Bobby Hebert had to hold out for a whole season, and it really changed the complexion of not only the New Orleans Saints, but really his career moving forward. So we'll get his thoughts on holdouts and how far they've come and really the ups and downs of his career. People forget what a great quarterback he was in the USFL. Then he had great success with the New Orleans Saints and now, of course, as a broadcaster. So big interview with Bobby Hebert coming up. Let's bring in Justin Thomas, our producer. Justin, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are y'all?
I'm great. Scott Shanle. First of all, Michael Thomas, I want to get your thoughts on that. I didn't think this would last long, but this was even shorter than I had predicted.
Yeah, it definitely was shorter. I thought, just like a lot of people thought, that they were going to get something worked out with Michael. And as we've seen, elite players keep setting the bar, and it's hard to argue with making the highest paid receiver in the NFL. You know, a lot of the national pundits talk about he's the beneficiary of Drew Brees. Listen, everybody's the beneficiary of other great players around him, but when you watch the way Michael works and you've seen all the things he's done in his first few years in the NFL, he deserved every penny, and I'm glad they got him locked up. And the one thing I'm happy with is, just like when the Texans paid J.J. Watt, he played his best football after signing that big money deal. I think the same thing's going to happen with Michael Thomas. He's more concerned about a legacy and being great than he is with his bank account.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie. 321 catches, the most of any receiver in his first 3 years in the NFL. I mean, he's averaged in his first 3 seasons 107 catches, 1,262 receiving yards, and 8 touchdowns per season. And I think the great thing is, you know, there's no distractions now. And I saw this coming. I mean, in minicamp, I asked Sean Payton about Michael Thomas, not even his contract, and it was the same day Cam Jordan had signed. And he said, well, Michael Thomas is next. I mean, they've made this a priority. And Scott, the great thing is, I think it's set the tone for this organization because they know the big contracts are coming with the likes of, that rookie class with Kamara and Ramczyk and Lattimore and all those guys.
Yeah, and when you look at it, depending on how much longer Drew plays, obviously Drew takes up a big portion of the salary cap because of his greatness and what he can do. What's going to be interesting coming up is how many of those young, great players can the Saints lock down? Because if they can't lock those guys down, we've said for the last 2 years, the time is now. You got to get the Super Bowl in now, so you don't have to rebuild your team. But if Drew ends up playing just this year or maybe next year, now you open it up a whole another piece of the pie, and hopefully we can lock down a lot of those young, great talents.
Well, the New Orleans Saints getting a lot of hype. Many people predict they will meet the New England Patriots if you look at the odds. And the Super Bowl coming up in Miami, it's going to be just a few months away now. But there are some doubters with the New Orleans Saints. Colin Cowherd likes to make this prediction every year of the playoff team that will take a step back. And he's been on the money. He predicted Minnesota. They took a step back. Then he picked Jacksonville. They took a step back. Well, his team to take a step back this year are the New Orleans Saints, and here is his logic with that.
The Saints are that team this year. They're coming down, folks. They're crashing hard. I hate to tell, they're crashing hard. There's a lot of reasons. A, they're still fuming over a loss last year. B, Drew Brees at the end of last year looked old and tired. C, their early schedule is absolutely the toughest in the NFL.
And he went on to talk about Max Unger and Mark Ingram, and I get it, Colin Cowherd. But when I look at the NFC, there's a lot more question marks to me with other teams. You look at Carolina with Cam Newton. The Bucs have question marks up and down. The Atlanta Falcons, to me, are the biggest team to worry about because I think Dirk Cutter is going to help Matt Ryan. But I think, he likes to get clicks and he likes to get attention. But, I respect a lot what Colin Cowherd says. But what do you think about this statement, Scott?
Well, I don't think anything he said as far as his takes are real off. Drew didn't play as well down the December last year, but the offensive line was also banged up. They've had two heartbreaking losses the last 2 years. So the Saints are one of those teams that it's easy to say are going to have a letdown, especially a bigger portion of that statement is their schedule. The schedule is brutal early on.
Yeah.
So all the things are stacked against the Saints. But then I go back to what you just said, Mike. When I go through the NFC, there's nobody on paper that I think is better than the Saints, top to bottom.
Right.
And staying healthy. I think Atlanta is going to be their only competition in the South. Carolina, Cam Newton's had his shoulder done again. They lost Peppers. They lost Thomas Davis. They lost their center, who was an all-pro player. I don't think Carolina's going to be much competition. Jameis Winston keeps turning the ball over in Tampa. Arians will help them a little bit. But to me, it's in the NFC, it's the Saints. As much as everybody would hate for me to say this, I think the Cowboys, and then I think the Rams. I think those are the three teams that are going to have a chance to come out of the NFC. But the Saints, to me, are the favorite, just top to bottom, the best roster in the NFC.
Yeah, I wanted to get to that because Colin Cowherd, I actually like his show. He always brings something new, and yeah, I don't disagree with the points there, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Before we get to Bobby Hebert, Bobby Hebert to me is almost like the Forrest Gump of football. I mean, he played for such a long time. I mean, he came out in the vaunted class in 1983 with all those big names. And people forget how great he was in the USFL. We'll get to that in just a second. But had such an unbelievable Saints career. What could have been if he hadn't held out back in 1990. We'll talk about that as well. But, the thing I really appreciate about Bobby Hebert is, I love listening to his post-game shows after the Saints games because it is unfiltered 100%, Scott.
That's what you're going to get from Bobby. And I think he is the main representative, one of the main representatives for Who Dat Nation. Not many players could be as beloved as Bobby Hebert is in Who Dat Nation and playing for the Atlanta Falcons in his career. It's unheard of. It just tells you how much people love Bobby, and just a great all-around guy. Every time you sit down and talk to him, you could have a 2-hour, 3-hour, 4-hour podcast with Bobby with his history of the game and just his takes are always entertaining.
All right, as promised, we bring in this week's guest, a Louisiana native. He went to Northwestern State, a legend in the USFL, the all-time leading USFL quarterback in passing yardage. Then he went on for a great career with the New Orleans Saints, 7 seasons, led the Saints to their first playoff appearance, their first division title. And lately, he's the leader of the Who Dat Nation, the Cajun Cannon. You know who I'm talking about. Welcome in, Bobby Hebert, everybody. Bobby, you know what? We're going to get to camp. We're going to get to your career. But I want to talk about Michael Thomas. I think everybody thought Michael Thomas's deal would get done sooner rather than later, and that's exactly what happened. But you went through a prolonged holdout back in 1990 that was legendary, really helped a lot of players moving forward in the NFL. Can you just talk about how far we've come in terms of contracts and holdouts when you see something like Michael Thomas?
Well, that's not even a holdout what Michael Thomas did. A holdout is a holdout. I mean, when I reflect back and think, I sat out a whole season. Boy, that kind of discourages me when I think about it. And especially when the season started and you're just trying to stick with your guns and you believe in the cause. And the bottom line is you had a hard-headed old-school general manager in Jim Finks and a hard-headed Cajun in Bobby Hebert, and I wasn't given. The difference, though, when you see some of these holdouts, Ezekiel Elliott, Michael Thomas, that I didn't have a contract. And I took the approach that I want market value. If you don't pay me market value, then I should be able to be free. But there was no free agency at the time. And Jim Finks was telling me, that being the general manager, I don't care what market value is. We own you. We can pay you whatever we want. And we didn't even have Saints didn't even have $1 million player on the team. And they were willing to give me like $850,000. But I looked over a 3-year period. I was ranked anywhere from like 6 to number 11, and I was getting paid like I was 19. So it was right under like $1.3 million. And Mr. Finks just said, I don't care about market value. We're going to pay you what I want. We hold all the cards. And then I got with the NFL Players Association, Jeff Kessler, number 1 antitrust lawyer. He says, man, I think what Jim Finks is doing to you, that we could beat the NFL. He said 80%. So I kind of liked those chances and just stuck to my guns. And really, I never would have came back with the Saints if John Fourcade or Steve Walsh, who they got in a trade from Dallas, would have worked out. but they didn't. They were basically a 500 team. And then here's Mr. Finks signed back in 1991. Coach Mara said he wouldn't sign his extension unless Mr. Finks brought me back. So he didn't even come to my press conference when I ended up signing. And here he didn't want to pay me $1 million, and then in '91 he paid me right under $1.8 million. So it's all power. It's a power struggle, and actually kind of, I guess, when the snowball effect, when I had to go testify in the antitrust lawsuit, the union disbanded and all that, and it's called the Freeman McNeil case. The names Freeman McNeil, Reggie White, Jarvis Bird's dad, Gil Bird, who was a DB with the Chargers then, Magic Man, Don Mikowski before Brett Favre was the quarterback with the Packers. Yeah. But I was the last one who testified against the NFL, and that's when within 24 hours they settled for $200 million with the players. And Gene Upshaw and all was going crazy. He goes, "Hey, Barrett, you were like awesome. You look like the poor." It was 12 woman jurors. I look like the poor peasant boy up there fighting the NFL. And I tell you what, they said slam dunk. And I can't think of his name, Greg Aiello, or I think that's right, the PR guy at the NFL. Yeah. Then you had payphones and all that. So he's like going in the hall and calling the NFL and said, "Hey, Bear's kicking our butt. We're going to have to settle." They had some intern that overheard him saying that. And so the bottom line, it got done. And so I got to have my cake and eat it too, because I got a great contract, ended up winning the antitrust lawsuit. And I think by me just taking that approach, and when that did go to trial in Minneapolis, Minnesota with Judge Doe, they probably pushed free agency 10 years sooner. I still think it would have came about, but probably about 10 years later if no one really was going to do anything. And I just took the approach. I thought, what's right is right. I'm a capitalist. Come on, it's un-American. I mean, how should you not be able to market yourself? And I always joked with Archie Manning that when Eli and Peyton got all those big deals, said, "Man, you need to give me a small percentage of that." Because I helped out a lot of these guys getting paid, considering, it's just a matter of principle. When you have a contract, is it a contract and all that? That gets kind of boring from a legal standpoint. But I know the players really appreciate it. I know what drove Mr. Things crazy was that the Dome Patrol was all on my side. Ricky Jackson, Sam Mills, everybody. And they kind of said, "Hey, Bear, if you don't get paid, everyone's going to get paid," kind of the trickle-down effect. So when I look back, it was tough because, you want to play, and being raised 50 miles south in New Orleans, I mean, I thought I might have to move permanently if things wouldn't work out when I came back. And then I looked at myself in the back end of my career as a mercenary and playing for all teams, playing with the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, I don't know, that'd have been like Scott playing for Nebraska and he transfers to Oklahoma, back in the day or something.
You bring up Archie Manning. We had him on a week ago, and we've had a lot of, people that and who Saints fans have rooted for years. And, I kind of asked the what-if game with Archie. Did you ever think about requesting for a trade? And he said, all kinds of people were in his ear when the Saints were struggling. I heard things that when you were holding out that the Raiders put maybe a draft pick and Marcus Allen on the table. Can you imagine how your life would have been different if you didn't continue playing for the Saints and maybe you went to an Oakland or something like that?
Well, I guess we can talk about it now. Al Davis passed away. Mr. Finks is no longer here, but actually moved to Southern California during the season in 1980. I was there for almost 6 weeks, right around the trade deadline. And Al Davis is convinced. He said, "No, this deal's going to work out." I was number 3. That was old Darryl LaMonica, the bomber. Al Davis loved those long balls. So he even had me a Raiders jersey, all kind of stuff.
Really?
So I actually moved. I was still training in LA. Like I said, I was there for a month and a half. And Mr. Finks basically said, "No, you're going to sit out and rot." And so then it got to be bitter and all that. But when I look at what he was willing to give up, and it's ironic because he was having problems with Marcus Allen, and what ended up happening when they had the antitrust lawsuit, and they settled, me and Marcus Allen ended up getting the most damages. Because what Al Davis did to him and what Jim Finks did to me as far as the damages with your contract.
Hey, Bobby, you made the statement you're a capitalist, and I think as a former player, we all appreciate everything you went through. You made the statement, Mike Thomas, he sat down. He didn't really sit out. You sat out the entire year and paved the way for all the players after you guys. And I'm hoping in this next CBA that they really make a deal that takes care of guys such as yourself with increasing pensions and doing those things, because the league wouldn't be what it is today without your guys' efforts. But I want to focus on your time in the USFL. I'm kind of intrigued by competing leagues against the NFL, and I think I saw that 30 for 30 on the USFL. And I just want to get your take on what your experience was like in the USFL.
Well, it was, again, right place, the right time. And I'm looking, Gil Brandt is getting put in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I got a great story with him and, the USFL. He was really one of the initial scouts, or I should say got recognized for his unbelievable ability to scout players. But I can remember, when I look back, I came out in probably the greatest class in pro football history as they're celebrating 100 years. I came out with Dan Marino, John Elway, Jim Kelly. They had, on the top of my head, I want to say 6, if not 7 guys started 10 years or more. Right now, they hope they could have 1 or 2 guys. Well, myself and Ken O'Brien, he was a quarterback for the Jets. He went to UC Davis. We were the only small college quarterback. So this new league, it's all about timing, comes into existence. The Michigan Panthers, they draft me, and they were willing to guarantee me $250,000. I'm like, I had a wife and a kid my senior year. I was on food stamps for 4 months. I go, $250,000. I thought I hit the lottery, and I was ecstatic with that. And then all of a sudden, they didn't even have the combine. This is the first year of the combine. It was in Tampa Bay, Florida. And, they invited me to go with all the quarterbacks, and Gil Brandt's telling me, well, boy, come to the combine. You can maybe slip into the back end of the second round. You look like a third rounder to me, in that realm. And then I just told him, I said, well, what can you guarantee me? And he says, oh, we don't do that. We can't guarantee you anything. So to me, it was a no-brainer to go to the new league and to go to the USFL and have an opportunity to play. And it was truly rags to riches. We won the championship game the first first season against Coach Martin, the Philadelphia Stars, who ended up and Sam Mills and all them, who I ended up playing with the Saints. But the one thing I could remember, and he was highly recognized, was Jim Kelly. The Buffalo Bills had his rights, but they didn't want to pay him. You look at Ralph Wilson, Hugh Coverhouse, Art Modell. They were old school owners where they didn't want to pay you anything. They took the approach that, hey, you're just lucky that you're here. You're going to take whatever we give you. And so Jim Kelly, I remember, would play with the Houston Gamblers in the United States Football League, and he said, hey, Bear, he goes, well, let me tell you, if you're good enough, you're going to end up in the NFL anyway. So you got to get the money while you can. So that was kind of the approach. And I think a lot of USFL players, look at Reggie White, played with the Memphis Showmotes. Steve Young had an unbelievable personal service contract, LA Express. You can go on and on, the quarterbacks. And you had old quarterbacks like a Doug Williams, played with Oklahoma Outlaws. You had Brian Sipe. He was the MVP in the AFC for the Browns and ended up playing. And, Donald Trump right then was, he owned the New Jersey Generals. He won the NFL to pick him as, to merge with him. But he had Doug Flutie. He had Herschel Walker. So you had high-profile players. And you look at Scott, what we didn't have was the depth. If somebody got hurt, it was night and day who was playing and not playing. But we really had a guy that ended up making the Pro Bowl at every position, offense and defense, coming out of the USFL, even though it only lasted 3 years.
Yeah, my second question, or it's kind of a statement as well, Bobby, is I'm going to tie it together, the capitalist statement we're talking about and a competing league with the NFL. This XFL, I don't think there's ever going to be a league that's going to overtake the NFL. The NFL is too powerful a brand, and
Right.
You talk about depth. From top to bottom, 1 through 53, the best players in the world are playing. But what I think the XFL can do to compete and give people a product is, people don't want to watch guys that are cut from the NFL playing a league. But what I think you could do is you could go to Clemson. You could go to Trevor Lawrence as a freshman and say, we'll give you $1 million to sign for the next 2 years. We'll give you a contract. And if you go pluck these best college football players, heck, half of Alabama's team, and you put them in the XFL, first, second round picks, you're taking away from the college game, which isn't good. But could the
Right.
XFL compete a little bit in that way of taking the college's best players while they still have 2 years to play or even 3 years to play in some cases. And to me, make it like real football where people can actually get hit, where people can actually get smacked coming across the middle, and give people the old brand of football. You think that'll work?
I think it'll work because I think you have great football players that don't necessarily want to go to school, go to class. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, so it's almost like a farm system, like AAA baseball, where you have the ability. Like Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker was a man and could have went straight to the NFL. Helped win a national championship, University of Georgia, and then he goes to the New Jersey Generals. And I look at a local product we had from LSU, Leonard Fournette.
Mm-hmm.
Leonard Fournette, if all of a sudden you could have all of a sudden approached him, okay, you could develop in our league, and if you're good enough, you'll end up in the NFL, but you end up making money. You know, the colleges, they call the money because it's amateur athletics, supposedly, but not as big business for the universities. But I think it could work our formula or figure it out where you're compensating. I mean, you can go to war at 18, so why can't you get paid playing football at 18? Now, not everybody is cut out to go to college and attend classes and all that, but they might want to reap the benefits early. And you know what? Then you kind of balance. So what are you actually going to pay them? But I think you can have some high-quality players that would say, let's say we give you $200,000 a year or whatever it might be, and instead of versus playing for free in college and then going to school, and maybe you're not cut out because everyone thinks they're going to play in the NBA, NFL, whatever. But here would be an opportunity that maybe you could be compensated for the craft of your football skills, football ability, and not necessarily cut out for college and school, and then take that approach. So I think if it's run right, the XFL can make it. Now, it'll be interesting to see. You always got to have the TV contract, or you got to get the exposure. And if you can get that, and I really think the USFL would have made it if it would have stayed at 12 teams instead of 18 and expanded too quick and not trying to and stay in spring and the summer. Don't go head to head in the fall with the NFL.
Bobby, I've talked to you about this. And it's a lot of people know this, but in high school, you weren't a 5-star guy coming out, and you really only played quarterback your senior year, I believe. Just talk about beating the odds in your career. I mean, if somebody would have told you maybe your junior year in high school, you're going to go on and play in the pros for as long as you did, and then become this broadcaster you've become. I mean, what would you have told somebody if you're a junior in high school that all of this football life was in front of you?
I wouldn't necessarily believe it. I mean, I was truly a late bloomer. When I was a freshman in high school and I was in ninth grade, I was like 5'8", 115 pounds. I didn't even like football. I liked basketball. I used to like to play basketball, and I was in my senior year, I ended up averaging right under like 23 points a game. But to show you my growth spurt at South Lafourche, like I said, 50 miles south of New Orleans, I went from playing point guard in 10th grade to playing center. And after we won the state championship in football, I played in 17 basketball games. I fouled out 15 times. And I was jacking people, giving them the business because I had to play center, and guys are 3 or 4 inches taller than me. So I was like pushing them all around and stuff. So, but I always enjoyed basketball, just being a late bloomer. And my junior year, played free safety. I like defense, and I think it helped me to play quarterback. Ended up getting like 8 interceptions. I know it's in high school, but I could beat quarterbacks, and especially in the zone type coverage. You're making, because high school quarterbacks are going to stare at the receiver, and they think the receiver's open. I break on the ball and intercept it. So I think it helped me when I finally did play quarterback my senior year. The quarterback we had at the time ended up being like an outside linebacker, small defensive end, Andy Martin. But every time he would sprint out, he would just run, even if the receiver was open. So the coach figured out, well, why don't we just put him at running back? Because they would see me throw the ball back to the coach. And then the rest of the history, I moved to quarterback and got a scholarship to Northwest Louisiana. And I couldn't have been in a better place. Coach A.L. Williams, Woodlawn High School in Shreveport. You're talking about Terry Bradshaw. My mentor, and I'm sure Scott has a mentor too, every player has this, was Joe Ferguson. He was quarterback Woodlawn High School with Shreveport, and he came every spring and he put in the Buffalo Bills offense at Northwest Louisiana. He went to University of Arkansas, and they were setting all kind of high school records in the 70s. Like, they would throw it for 250 yards when people were running the wishbone. So he showed me how to play the quarterback position. I never forget, we'd have the 20 practice in the spring, and here I was. I was Joe Ferguson. The great late Joe Delaney was Rookie of the Year with the Kansas City Chiefs. And I want to say 1982 was O.J. Simpson for us. We had Mark Super Duper, who set all these records with Dan Marino and Mark Clayton. So I was just at the right place, the right time. I didn't even know, in high school, my coach would tell me, just throw it to whoever's open. I didn't know anything about coverages, 3-step, 5-step drop, just how the game changed. I was just raw and, again, at the right place, the right time. And they'll find you wherever you're at. It's amazing when I even look at this day and age, like Emmanuel Butler, Northern Arizona. I'm like, I said, why didn't this guy go like to Arizona State? Northern Arizona is a fine program, kind of like Northwest Louisiana, McNeese State. But they, the coach had him at tight end. He's a tall guy, big guy, and they had a good team, other talented receivers, and he never really had that opportunity to showcase his talent. But he goes to Northern Arizona. Look at Demario Davis, who I had a long conversation with today, from the state of Mississippi, kind of a late bloomer under the radar. Why didn't he go to SEC school? He went to Arkansas State. So it's just a matter of you get that opportunity and take advantage of it. Now, I'm sure Scott, some fans think he's an overachiever. I say, well, you're not an overachiever if you end up at Nebraska. I think Scott Shanle was a stud all his life.
Hey, I was 165 dripping wet as a freshman in high school. I ended up putting on 20 pounds a year throughout high school, got faster. And, I almost went to the University of Kansas, Bobby, until I took my visit there and thought, this isn't Nebraska. This isn't like putting the N on my helmet. So it was an easy decision.
Yeah, if you don't win, Scott, if you don't win Kansas, you weren't going to play basketball.
Hey, Bobby,
the Jayhawk football
I took my official visit to Kansas. My dad wanted me to take the visit. First thing they showed me was the Allen Fieldhouse where they play basketball. I looked at my dad and said, heck no, how fast can we get back in the car and go home?
Yeah, no, what's ironic about that, because the local ties, if Les Miles wins at Kansas, they need to build a statue of him.
Absolutely, I agree.
I mean, and I'll give him his props, because if he can win at Kansas, I'm going to give Les Miles credit. But I don't know. I think I would have held LSU's feet to the fire without working, Scott. I don't know. He's getting about 150, 170,000 a month, and he kind of cut a deal. I don't know. This day and age, I'm too opportunistic to maybe give up that kind of deal and go coach at Kansas. I guess he wanted to coach that bad.
Yeah. Hey, Bobby, I have a question as far as the way the NFL has changed. Maybe you kind of touched on it, the coaching, all those things now, it's so much more scientific. The athletes keep getting bigger, faster, stronger. But I've always thought, when I watch the classic games back when you played compared to now, does it irk you as a quarterback that you guys used to just get smashed in the face, forearm shivers, under the chin, and now these guys today get to sit back there? If they get grazed, it's a 15-yard penalty. I mean, it's helping their careers. I mean, it's great to have Drew and Tom and those guys playing until 40s. I mean, they're absolutely studs. But how would have it changed your era of quarterbacks and your stats and just the longevity of your careers?
Well, they used to get a step and a half. I mean, Scott, I don't know if I ever told you this story. I never forget, we were playing the 49ers and Joe Montana. And, well, you're getting rid of the ball quick and you get waylaid and you look at the official. That's not a late hit. Oh, no, he gets a step and a half. I'm like, what? The ball's been long going out of my hand. And what was crazy about that, one time I ended up getting like 4 stitches across my lip. I can't think. It was the big shot putter, Carter from SMU. Who ended up playing the 49ers. He came across, tomahawk chop, just freaking gashed open my lip. And I looked at the official. I said, I'm talking, you're not going to call that? You got to be effing kidding me. And I'm looking at him. And then I just kept yakking at him. I said, I bet if it was Joe Montana, you would call it. And he turned around, looked at me. He goes, yeah, you're probably right. And then he walked away. I go, that's like, man, I said, you got to be kidding me. No, the hits, it was, just getting knocked out. And a lot of times how they would finish the tackle. You get hit, and look at the 11 concussions that I've had. You know, and I feel fortunate. I said, well, 11 concussions, how can you feel fortunate? I never had more than one in a year. I look at, you know, in that time span from 82 to 97, that I never had more than one in a year. And I know, like Steve, talking with Steve Young and Troy Aikman about this, that they definitely would have played longer and had the ability. But then they got a concussion, and, you know, you get peer pressure and you go back out there. And then even though you woozy, whatever, and then they end up getting another one like 2 or 3 weeks later. And then that's when it's not good. I know Chris Miller, who I played with in Atlanta, you know, he's from University of Oregon. Now, this was sad. This is one reason why he decided to retire early, because he's at the grocery store and he couldn't find his way home. And I said, well, now that's when, you know, it starts get really serious. But, I mean, I just think you can't be bitter, and I think they all about player safety. And it's like now they train year-round. You don't even have 2 days no more. I mean, Scott, I'm so old. I remember my first 3 years, they were smoking halftime in the locker rooms. Can you imagine? Everybody's all sweating. They're like his coach is talking. They got guys smoking cigarettes and stuff. And head coaches smoking cigarettes on the sideline. I remember the great Charlie Sumner, who was the defensive coordinator with the Raiders when Marcus Allen, when they waxed Joe Theismann and the Redskins in that Tampa Bay Super Bowl. Well, he ended up being my head coach with the Oakland Invaders. And he would smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a game. And then I'd come to talk to him on the sideline, and he'd be like blowing smoke. I said, can you imagine the political correctness today? If people would see that, yeah, there'd be a protest or something. But, you know, times changing. I guess you just have to go with the flow. But, you know, it's kind of like almost when, you know, your grandparents might say, oh, when I had to walk to the, you know, 2 miles to walk to the bus stop in the snow or something. And, you know, so it's one of the – I don't want to be one of these disgruntled individuals because I think players are bigger, stronger, faster now. But they're a little more entitled, I think, and the expectation, what they expect, what they owe before they actually go out and accomplish something.
Well, Bobby, I know you got to run, but before you go, we have to put you through the test. Justin, you know what time it is.
Okay.
You know, I respect your time, Mr. Hebert. We could keep you for an hour. I'd like to talk to you about all the free T-shirts you get from the Who Dat Nation. Every time I see you at training camp or practice, you got another great uncopyrighted shirt that's the kind that everybody likes. But I want to ask you about so many things. But this is more likely 3 hypotheticals. Archie Manning, we had fun with him last week. We had fun with the likes of Marcus Colston and Roman Harper. We've had a lot of great guests on. But our first more likely, I'm going to be, you know, we haven't touched on the Saints too much. More likely, Bobby Hebert, how do you feel about this Saints team in training camp so far? What's your biggest concern, and what do you like about this team so far?
Well, my biggest concern right now, Alvin Kamara, man, I get hurt.
Yeah.
You know, who's the weapons? No, you got to have luck with injuries. I guess every team could say that. But that's a Deuce McAllister, you know, does the color of the Saints. We were talking that I almost wish they were playing right now. Like, okay, play one preseason game. Let's get the season rolling. Because I think they have the potentials there, expectations, but they're going to have to stay healthy. You know, I'm intrigued with the defensive line, that what's going to occur there, because Sheldon Rankins, boy, just a shame. You know, when you're really rolling, you're getting better.
Yeah.
Then he gets hurt. He's been kind of snake bit. You know, he's been aggressive and he looks like a great leader, and maybe because he won Super Bowls with the Patriots. But talking with Cam Jordan about this, Malcolm Brown, you know, I had a text a 5-year guy. He looks all of 6'3", 320, but he has a little more wiggle, more than I thought, and even at times has some ability to rush the passer. And I asked him about that. He said, well, the Patriots just wanted me to stop the run first and second down, and now I want the opportunity maybe to rush the passer given those opportunities. But right now, looking at the Saints where they're at, I mean, last year to me was easy. I know Vegas had them, the win total over and under 9. I said, take the over. I think a lot of people won money on that one.
Right.
Now I think they ride on. When they have it at 11, I think that's about where the Saints are. They could be 2-2 and start the season. Tough stretch just to kick off the season. I think they could be 2-2 and still win 11 games. But you know, you want to always get off to a great start. Monday night, playing the Houston Texans. You want to come away with a win. Then you got to go at the Rams. You can stay on the West Coast and at Seattle. And, of course, we got to beat the Cowgirls. I'm like, one win has to be against Dallas. We can't lose to Dallas in back-to-back seasons. So a lot of local folks, part of that Cowboy Nation that live in Louisiana, say, well, how can you be for Dallas? The Saints are good. You need to move back to Texas or something. I mean, so you got to be for the Saints. But that's one game that I'm hoping, the Saints just got to win for my sake. But everyone's optimistic, high expectations. And I think the fans are more hungover, are still way disgruntled about the no call. I think the players have moved on and really got too much on your plate to really dwell on that. I think that's more the fans totally being disheartened what occurred, because you can be so close and still so far. I think we'll be talking about that when we all know folks home, breaking down that woulda, coulda, shoulda opportunity.
Yeah, the last two questions, you'll like these. Hopefully you like these. We like to have fun a little bit, and we do it in different ways with our guests. I asked Jim Henderson this question. If he could pull out of his driveway and drive from Louisiana to California, which former Saints coach would he pick? I've asked a lot of the players which former teammate. I'm going to change it for you, Bobby Hebert. If you're pulling out of your driveway and you have to drive to California, I know you have family out there, which former quarterback you played with rides shotgun with you? John Forcade, Jeff George, or Steve Walsh?
I would say none of them. I'd say Billy Joe Tolliver. So Billy Joe would be a freaking blast. Now, we might not make it to California. It might take us 2-3 times as long. So Billy Joe Tolliver would be the one. He's a hoot. He would. No, whether I'm with football or not, I want to hang out with that guy. He is awesome.
Oh, well, Jim Henderson went off the board and picked Bum Phillips. So going off the board, we allow that. Okay, last question. We'll let you get out of here. You were number 3 as a New Orleans Saint, Bobby Hebert. If you could have 3 of anything in this world, what would it be? 3 of anything.
3 of anything.
Of anything.
Now that's kind of putting me on the spot. I thought you would actually. Why did I choose number 3? Because I've never. I don't know. Scott might have had maybe a favorite number. Now I'm changing this question around, going off on a tangent. But I've never had the same number. I've had 2 jerseys retired. I had number 15 in high school, number 12 in college, and the USFL was 11. And the only number I picked was when I went to the NFL, number 3, because my mom says, "Come on, you got to be blessed. You got to come off, being a good Catholic, Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. We need that Trinity.
I like it.
We need all that. We got to be prayed for. You need all the help you can get." So I thought that's maybe the route you're going about, the number 3. But I just kind of, whatever the equipment man gave me, I just took that jersey. And then in 15, just so happened to be one of my idols, Bart Starr, who didn't like the Packers, growing up in the 60s. But what was the original question? I forgot.
Well, it's easier. It's easier when I ask linemen this, because they can just go for the money.
Yeah.
If they have like $88 billion, if you could have 3 of anything, like 3 cars, 3 houses, it could be 3 of anything you want, Bobby.
I would like one would be a Swiss bank account that would be unlimited. So an offshore account that probably could not be, I don't know, investigated, because I'm joking. But I think it would just be health. I mean, one thing, how can you not want your health? If you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And people might say, oh, well, money's not everything. But I know money gives you freedom to do things. So anybody that poo-poos money, they probably haven't done a lot of things in their life. I mean, and in, family, I think, God, right now I have 2 granddaughters, just being a part of their life.
Yeah.
And just being so grateful and thankful whenever you have health, yourself as an individual and your family. And I'm working right now to be, my wife's done a great job with this, for me to be a little more sympathetic, empathetic. Because, T-Bob will tell you that, even when I was coaching a little league and all that, I'm thinking, broke his arm one time, and I said, "Oh, suck it up. You're gonna be okay. We're gonna go to the doctor." So kind of taking the approach, being a little more empathetic, and with age, I'm getting that way. But I'm excited. My two granddaughter just went out to Disneyland, went out to California, and see my daughter that lives out there. And but I would have to say, if you have your health, you have everything. And then if you've been blessed financially, you could do a lot of things with your family and really be exposed to the world. And I love history. And I just finished. I'm heading. I never had no desire, but I just you might have seen. I think I'm on Netflix or something. The Last Tsar. Read this whole book on Rasputin, and I'm just cannot fathom what occurred basically 100 years ago when the communists took over in Russia, and just St. Petersburg. I want to go visit that, and just the Romanovs and how they were in charge for 300 years and how fell by the wayside. So, you got to have money to be able to do all those things. So that, I guess that'd be have enough freedom that I'm not in a bind to do the things that I want.
Well, from Jim Finks to Rasputin and all points in between, we covered it all. Bobby, I know you gave us some great stories. You delivered. That's what we want to do in this podcast. Have a great training camp and a great season coming up. I know the Who Dat Nation loves hearing everything you have to say. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thanks for having me on. You and I, so go back to West Virginia in training camp, and we've always gotten in conversations about the team. And I'll tell you what, Scott Shanle's one of my favorite players because, he reminds me kind of common folk like me. And I don't know, I don't think Scott bamboozled me, but I tell you what, Scott seems like the kind of guy that I will let him date my daughter. And I don't know if that's a good thing, but he has for sure has me fooled. I don't think I'm fooled. I think he's that good of a guy. And I've always admired Scott Shanle from afar.
I appreciate that, Bobby. I've always appreciated your support, going back to the playing days and even now, sitting down talking Saints football with you. But hey, if I could have three of anything, I want to see Bobby Hebert do the Who Dat chant 3 more times this year, because it's been the best Who Dat chant I've ever seen. You got to make that happen, Bobby.
Oh, I almost listen. It was such a kind of spiritual experience. I'm walking off the field, and my daughter says, "She goes, Dad." I said, "Man, I was about to start crying. I was getting so emotional." I had in French, you call them, 3 songs, which is goosebumps. The hair was rising on my arm. Because, you look back to, man, I'll never have this feeling again. Scott, when you're walking through the tunnel or running through the tunnel for a game, feel like a modern-day gladiator. Just unbelievable the response to the fans and how they love their team. And hopefully we win a few games and they'll have me back out there, because I thoroughly enjoy that. They had to kick me. They didn't let me stay on the sideline. Again, a little too close to the field. They made me go back up in the press box. But I like it where we're at. Where we're at in the press box, we could cheer and nobody hassles us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit it right on the head, Bobby. You can't understand unless you're down there and know what that feels like. I wish you could bottle up that feeling you just talked about, because, like you said, no amount of money in the world. Jeff Bezos, he can't buy the feeling you have standing in that tunnel before you go out and play a football game. So
right.
We're very blessed and very fortunate.
Very blessed. And,
Bobby, we really appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Bobby.
Great stuff from the Cajun Cannon. I think my biggest takeaway is Bobby Hebert would trust Scott Shanle with his own daughter. How about that, Shanle?
You just don't know how to quite react to a statement like that from a dad. But I think it means a lot. It really does. I mean, when someone says that's basically their way of saying you're a fine person and they trust you. I know having a daughter, that's a big time statement from a dad. So I appreciate Bobby. I appreciate all the support he gave me as a player. Always had my back and was very supportive, and always appreciate that about Bobby Hebert.
I remember Mark Richt. I used to work in Tallahassee, and of course the coach of Georgia, but he was Bobby Bowden's offensive coordinator for years. And his sister married Brad Johnson, his former quarterback, because he said, you know what, I want Brad Johnson is the kind of guy I would trust to marry my sister. I think he kind of introduced him. So, that is high praise for Scott Shanle from Bobby Hebert. Hebert asked us initially, how long will this interview be? And I threw out 20 minutes knowing there is no way in hell we're going to have 20 minutes with Bobby Hebert. It's going to go over a half hour. I wanted to ask him about the Coach O stories at Northwestern, but there's no way we could have fit everything in there.
No, but that's the great thing is Bobby's always going to give you an in-depth look, and he's not a person or an interview that you just have to stick to one main topic. We went from everything from, heck, we didn't even touch on really the Atlanta playing days, but we could have went a lot more into Saints playing days. We hit on free agency, how he set the tone for that. Just a lot of different avenues we could have taken, and he always does a great job.
I like how he brushed past 4K George and Walsh and just launched Billy Joe shotgun, man. Yeah, I'm sure.
I raised my eyebrows because he went off the board, which is not a lot of people do that, but he was very adamant that Tolliver would have been a great ride. So now I have to look up this Tolliver guy and see if there's any way I can get to know him to see exactly what Bobby sees in him as far as riding across the country with him.
Well, I may call a network and do Hebert and Billy Joe cross country. We can sell this thing, and they can just stop like 20 times. And hell, I'd tune in on Netflix for that. Anyway, listen, we really appreciate everybody checking out our platforms. I wanted to let you know on Twitter, you can follow us at Dundat Podcast, So please follow us on Twitter. We like to preview and kind of highlight all the interviews we've had, and we'll let you know what about upcoming guests. We're on all the platforms. We're on iTunes, we're on Podbean, we're on Stitcher, we're on Spotify, we're on Google+. And if you like our podcasts, please give us a rating and a comment on what you like, or maybe what you would like, a guest that you'd like us to have. We're optimistic. We're going to get Drew Brees and Sean Payton on soon. And we've had a great run the last couple of months. We're really excited about what's ahead. More and more people are subscribing and jumping on board. So for Scott Shanle, my partner, and our producer, Justin Thomas, I'm Mike Nabors. Thanking Bobby Hebert as well. That was an entertaining half hour plus. More guests to come. Keep it here on your Been There, Done That podcast.